Hey, so today we're going to take a look at the idea of using the Karma hair procedural to generate a wheat field. So I'm starting out here in the Solaris context. I've got the Solaris desktop open. First of all, I just want to start creating some geometry, so I'm going to create a sub create. Let's just dive right in here and let's create my terrain. For this, I'm just going to use a grid. And I'm going to set the size to 200 meters and my rows and columns to 100 by 100. Now I just want to add a mountain sop, which essentially is just a attribute noise. Let's just bump up the amplitude here to see what's going on. Just going to make it 1 for now. Now you can see it's super noisy and fine. What I like to do is, for what I want, is to use the woolly cellular noise, and I just want to bump up this scale quite high, or the element size. Let's make it 90 and bump up the amplitude quite a bit. You can see now I'm getting these kind of peaks, and I don't really want that. I want hills. So what we can do is set the operation to subtract, and then I kind of start getting these little bit of a hill feel going. That's quite cool. I'm just going to minimize this scene graph tree. Okay, now let's start creating our guides that's going to control the hair procedural. For this, I want to use the hair generate. Reason for this is it comes with some attributes that the hair procedural uses. Just one note: when you drop it, don't drop it and connect it straight away. It's going to try and create tons of guides. So you can just go ahead and set this density to 1 and then connect it. And now you'll see, if I middle mouse on here, I've got just over 40,000 guides. And then, yeah, just moving on, just going to zoom in here a bit. You can see there is no length or anything on them. And to sort this out, we can use the guide process. Just going to drop a blank one. And let's connect this in here. And I don't want direction, I want length. And now let's set a random length, and I'm going to set this length to just start it out from 0.5 to 1. Not too bad. I'm just going to make it maybe 1.3, 0.7, so there's a little bit of variation, but not too much. So when I just introduce some random bend, so I'm going to add another operation here and change the operation to bend. Now you can see if I change the angle, nothing happens. And in order to get it to work on this layout, I need to set the mode to axis constant, sorry. And that's going to bend it all in one direction. And it's probably a bit much, but what I want to do is just randomize the direction, and then let's just reduce it down to 15. 15 is probably good. Let's round that off. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so now we've got that basic setup. What I want to now do is do some Vellum wind, and for this I'm going to use the hair generate, or hair configure, and a Vellum solver. Let's just wire this guy up here, and we need to connect the input and the constraints from the Vellum hair to the solver. So let's just view this straight off away, and let's view this and play and see what happens. Okay, so two things, they're kind of dropping down and the scene is moving quite slow. So let's just make things a little bit quicker. For this purpose, we're just doing wind, so I'm going to disable collisions. And then what I want to do as well is just to optimize this really, so I can see what's going on, is on the hair gen, it's got quite a neat feature. You can limit to bounding box, and I'm just going to set this to let's say 20 by 20 meters, 20 meters. And now you can see I've got this little square cut out of my field. And now if I hit play, you can see I'm getting super fast interaction. I'm just going to set my real-time toggle. And now let's go ahead and sort out these guides that are falling away. For this we just need to pin the base, and for this we can use a group expression, and we'll just plug it in after our setup here, and we can just call this name, just call it roots, and under this little arrow here we can say go find first point of primitive, and it gives us this little expression. I'll view this now. I just need to set the group type to points, and you can see got points, the group on the first primitive, or the first point of each primitive rather. And then going back to the hair, now I just need to expand this down, and then the pinpoints I need to just set that to roots. Now if I go back to my solver and hit play, you can see okay, we're getting some pinned roots, but it's a bit loose, so we want to just up the bend stiffness of the guides here, just so they don't fall over. And I'm just going to set this, let's try 0.01. Not too bad, it's probably a little bit, for this purpose it's probably a little bit weak still, so let's try 1. Yeah, it's quite cool, it's just like settling and sitting there. Okay, I'm just going to now go ahead and start looking at the wind setup. First of all, I just want to increase this bounding box size here, just to make it a little bit more, give us a bit more room to see what's going on. It's not too bad, 50 by 50 meters. And let's just dive right into this Vellum solver and drop a pop wind. And I'm going to connect this up to the force. Okay, so now let's just start out with a base amplitude of 1. And what I'd like to do is just to see what's going on is just turn on these guides. And you can get a good idea of what that noise pattern is looking like. Just something that's unfortunate, if you change the wind velocity here out now to a direction, changes the guide direction. It's a pity you can't control this separately, but for now we're just going to leave it at 0 so we can look at the guides from a top-down view. Okay, so what I want to do is just increase the size because we've got quite a large field. Just take it up to 10 for starters, and the swivel scale I just want to bump up, make it 3, and hit play. And you can see I've got like a sort of slightly larger scale swivel there. I think I can maybe increase the swivel size even more. Let's just double this to 20. I've got some motion that's quite far apart. My amplitude's probably a little bit low. Let's make this 2. Okay, now I'm getting some interest. So another thing I just want to do is quite a neat little trick, is this attenuation. If you drop it down, it kind of, let's go to this frame. If you drop it down, you can see the guide starts smoothing out. Let me just reduce the scale so we can see what's actually going on. So everything starts smoothing out, some point it breaks, but what happens if you go above the value, and let's say to 1.5, you can see I'm getting these areas that are quite intense and these areas that are almost non-existent. They're kind of flat, and this is quite cool for creating like little almost patches of noise. And so what I'm going to do is just increase the swivel size again back to my 20. Now you can see I'm getting, let's see, it's like patches of areas that are moving more than others, which is quite interesting. At the moment, what is going on is kind of all moving in one space. It looks a bit weird. And I'm just going to offset the turbulence in X, and I'm going to do this over time, so we can just go at time, and this basically offsets this noise, and it will travel through this scene over time, and it kind of gives you that almost noise, that wind wisping through the field. That's a little bit fast, I think, at the moment, so I'm just going to dial it down to 0.5. That's quite interesting. Let's just disable my guide, and I'm going to jump back out to my, not too far out there. Let's just jump back out here, and let's go up to this hair gen and disable this box so we can see all our guides, all 40,000 of them, and see what that looks like with our sim. As you can see, it's pretty quick. We've got no collisions and stuff, so this is something quite nice and fast. So my RAM is set quite low on this current default setup, but that's fine for now. Okay, so I just want to move on to the Solaris side of things and get the hair procedural set up. First of all, I just want to expand this little scene graph tree, and we can see the sub create here, my curve 0, which is an ideal naming. So I'm just going to change this name here to field, and it will update on the sub create. To change the curve 0, this is going to be our guide, so we can drop a name sub and just drop this in, and in this name parameter here we could just say let's call this wheat guides, and that will update immediately. We also need the terrain to come through, so I'm going to drop another name sub and connect that up to the mountain, and let's call this terrain. And I'm going to go ahead and merge these guys together. And drop an output, so we get the last output always. And immediately you can see I've got field and then terrain and wheat guides. Okay, moving back to my stage level. Now let's have a look at this hair procedural. For this I can just start typing hair, and it's the first thing that comes up. Let's connect this guy. Now we've obviously got the same problem. It's sitting outside our field setup, and it's got a horrible name, so we're going to call this one wheat render. And I just need to go find that $OS, and I need to add my field. It's /field, and now you can see we've got 3 components here: our terrain, our guides, and our render. So what we need to do now on the procedural is we need to add guide curves. So we're going to use our wheat guides, and then the skin prims is actually going to be our terrain in this case. And then that's pretty much that part. You can see there's an error here, and this is looking for a rest position on the guides and the skin. To fix this, we can just go back into our SOP and do a rest position, and I'm going to drop this before my Vellum sim just so it's a static rest, and I'm going to copy and paste it and put it in my terrain as well. So going back, now you can see the errors are gone. One thing I want to just change while I'm just looking at this is our guides are quite narrow still. I'm just going to bump them up a little bit. I'm just going to make this 3. Just go out again. Alright, and let's see what happens when we try render this thing. So I'm going to switch to my Karma viewport. By the way, I'm using XPU, it's quite a bit faster. You can see there's nothing happening, and this is what's actually missing is to view a hair procedural in the Karma delegate. You need to drop a a preview Houdini procedurals, and we'll just drop that at the end and view that. Now we've got another error coming up, and to fix this problem I discovered what you need to do. Let me just go back to viewport mode, is go back into the wheat setup, into the SOP. Now you'll see on the hair gen, if I go to the geometry spreadsheet and to my primitives, there is a skin prim UV attribute and a skin prim attribute that's here. But as soon as I go to my guide process, this is kind of missing. So what I found is if you connect this output, which is skin, to the input here, it should work, but it doesn't. So what you need to do, I think there's some kind of caching going on, so you need to just disable the hair gen, re-enable it, and now you can see we've got some correct values coming through on this guide process as well. And this will filter all the way through to the bottom. Now, so if we go back out to our stage and we go back to the render view, go back to Karma, now we can see we've got some guides, or rather some render hairs, let's say. This is not guides, but there's very few of them. So in order to just fix this up, going on to the hair procedural, this influence radius is pretty small considering the size of the scenery setting on. So I'm going to set this to say 1 unit, and now you can see, okay, we've got a render going. This is looking pretty decent. If I zoom in here, you'll see one thing though that's missing is the shapes are all uniform and they don't look much like the guides. Just to show you what the guides look like, I can just toggle on this little sunglasses and I can turn on the guides, and now you'll see the guides in between. There's a guide there with some width attributes and a render guide or a render that's got no attributes on it. So this is basically been broken after the Vellum sim. So what we need to do is just some attribute cleanups, and I'm going to go into the SOP create again, and let's just drop a attribute delete, and I'm going to put this directly after my Vellum solver, and let's just have a look what's going on in here. So I've got a bunch of point attributes. I don't really need too many of them, possibly velocity, and I definitely need width. Now and then just I don't need to change anything on the vertex. Details, there's a bunch of stuff, I don't need any of that, so I'm just going to grab star there. And then on the primitives, I'm going to need skin prim and skin prim UV. I'm not sure about ID, we'll have a look. This is obviously currently deleting those, so which we don't want to do. So I just need to basically star delete everything except velocity and except width. And then I just need to delete everything except skin prim and skin prim UV and ID. So now if we look at our attributes, we've got a much cleaner workflow compared to if we hover over the Vellum solver. Okay, so going back to the stage, of course our width is a bit broken, so let's go have a look and see. Of course I did not include the most important part, which is width. Bit silly. And let's just go back out and now render. Now we can see we've got our renders working correctly. We've still got the guides rendering. Let's turn those off. Yep, everything's working properly. I'm just going to zoom in here. So while I'm busy with the width attributes, I'm just going to, I want to create like a little almost wheat head shape, just a kind of a rough shape, just to give a bit of variation and hit some light in lighting. So we're going to go back into the field, and I'm going to go all the way up to the hair generate. I'm actually just going to view this guy And then on this width tab, I want to start adjusting this. I'm just expanding this down so we've got a bit more space to see things. And let me just minimize this guy. And then I'm going to bring, so this is the end. This is kind of moving a little bit slow. So what I want to do is just go to the general tab and do this limit to bounding again. I'm just going to make this super small, so we got better interaction. And now if I move this down, you'll see, okay, I've got a lot more interaction. So this is kind of the stem side, and then I just want to kind of bring up, so almost an even stem, like a sharpish edge here, and then kind of this like little head shape of sorts that's happening up here. Maybe make this a bit wider. Okay, that's not too bad. Let's just disable this limit to bounding box while we're thinking about it, and then go back to our stage. Now if I render, you can see I'm getting this kind of wider edge up here, which is makes it look a little bit more interesting, especially when you zoom out. It's got a feel like there's something more of an edge. I think maybe the base is a little bit thin. I'm just gonna tweak that up a bit. I'm just gonna select both these guys and just make them, that should be fine. Go back to the stage. It's a little bit better. Now we just want to start looking at a bit of shading, so let's just go ahead and start with that. And I'm going to drop a materials library and a assign materials, and I'm going to dump this afterwards. You can connect this in here, but I generally keep it separate, so I'm just going to do a merge and type in materials in separately. Just want to expand my scene graph tree so I know what's going on. And then in my materials, I'm just going to create 3 materials, and one for the wheat render, one for the guides, just so we can see what the guides are looking like, and then one for the terrain. So I'm going to do a Karma hair shader. I'm going to duplicate this. This one's going to be guides, and this one's going to be render. And then my terrain, I'm going to use a material X standard surface. So we're going to go MTLX surface, standard surface. And let's just call this terrain. Right, getting to some colors. I just want to make the terrain quite dark. So I'm going to go like a sandy kind of dark, quite dark. I don't want it to stand out. And then my roughness, I'm just going to bump right up to like 0.9 or so. I'm going back to my guides. I want to turn off color. This color is like a transmission, so I don't really want that on just for the visual purposes. But I'm going to turn on diffuse, and I'm going to set this to red so we can see them. And then on the, for now on the Karma render, I'm going to set this color to 0 as well, and I'm just going to give this a green color just so we can see it, and set the diffuse to 1. This is just so we can see we're assigning the correct materials. Now before I go ahead and assign them, we can see this materials is sitting outside this field again, so let's just fix that. I'm just going to do a field / now I'm sitting with my whole setup in this field, and let's assign these materials. So I've got 3 materials that I want to assign, so let's just do 3 materials, and let's just connect things up. So I'm going to start kind of top down here, I guess. Let's start with the terrain primitive, the wheat guide primitive, and the wheat render primitive, and then I want to assign the guides to the guides, the render to the render, and obviously the terrain to the terrain. Okay, so those are now assigned, and if I look at my render now, you can see I've got my little green guys, which is my render, and if I go to the sunglasses and I turn on my guides, you can see I've got my guides in there as well. And this is kind of just nice to way to visualize if things are working properly. I think I can actually up my number of hairs here that I'm generating. Let's just double this, and you can see I'm getting quite a nice field of grass almost looking now, but we want wheat, so we're going to change that color. And let's just go to that. So going back into the material, I now want to assign some random color or color variation to each Karma render here, or the hair render. So for this we need to use the material X cell noise, and let's just start setting up how that works. So first of all, we need a USD from there, and this is to get the ID, which is an integer, so that's ID. And then I'm just going to drop the MTLX cell noise. You'll see this is expecting texture coordinates, and this is an integer. So what we need to do is do a MTLX combine, and this kind of creates the vector, or creates a float and then to a vector out. So I'm just inputting the one and then plugging it out to my cell noise. And now I need some color variation. You could do a ramp, but for this I'm just going to use a mix node, and I'm going to plug this in to my mix value, and now I'm going to plug that output into my diffuse color. Now this value, this needs to be obviously a color, and let's just give it some reasonable colors. So let's make this totally different colors so we can see it's working, and indeed it's working. And okay, so let's change it to our colors we want now. So I'm going to do a little bit of a yellow, maybe desat it a bit, it's not so bright. And then I want to do let's just make a darker kind of color, maybe a slight green tint to it, and let's make it darker and desat it so it's kind of maybe a slightly older wheat, and then the brighter one's the younger wheat. I'm going to turn off these guides so we can see what's going on. Sometimes you need to restart Karma just to see that kind of update. For some reason it's still picking that up. Right, so I just have to restart my Karma render there. Now we can see it's working. I've got two colors, possibly a bit hard to see without any lighting. So let's just add some lighting to this scene. I'm going to drop another merge here after my materials, and I'm going to create a dome light base. Let's view that. It's possibly a bit bright, so I'm going to just take it down a stop. Now you can see I'm definitely getting that variation of color. Let's view it at this angle. Now what I want to do possibly is adjust how much of the darker ones there is versus the light. And what I can do in that case is I can drop a range in between here, and this needs to be a material X range. I'm just zooming a bit closer in here. I can dial this value so it kind of adjusts the mix, the blend between the two colors. So if I go more this way, I'm going to get a lot darker, and so I'm going to just bring the height down, and then I get a little bit more yellow coming through. This predominant color, which looks a little bit better. Going back out this way. So now let's just, I think before I want to drop another light, but before we do that, I just want to find a decent camera angle here. And let's just close this so we've got a little bit more room to see what's going on. That's not too bad like that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to control click on the camera, and that will place the camera where I want it. I'm just going to disable this lock, and then I'm going to rotate away around from the camera somewhere like that, and then I'm going to control click here to put a distant light down and just reorganize this guy. I'm just going to drop it up here and view my camera again. Okay, so you can see now I've got some lighting happening. I'm just going to disable this dome light so we can see what the distant is doing. It's quite soft at the moment, so I'm just going to up the exposure. And that's looking a little bit better. You see I'm getting some long shadows coming through, some shadows in the hill, in the valleys here. I think what I want to do is just bring it down a little bit, so I can just drag and drop this on the viewport, and I can just drop it around, maybe rotate it back down a bit, and then just go to my camera and drag and drop that on the viewport. So that's quite interesting. I've got these nice heavy shadows coming in on this side. Let's just enable my dome again. That's not looking too bad. One thing we're missing is kind of those nice glints or highlights from the sun. And what we're missing really is that's from the shader. So what we can do on the material, the render shader, is we can actually turn on this color. And this, like I say, it's a bit of a like a transmission kind of vibe. So if you up the value here, you'll see you'll start getting some light coming through. This is not going to work too well. My diffuse is too high. So if I drop my diffuse down, say 0.5 or so, somewhere around there, now you can see I'm getting these highlights, and let's just drop this way down so we don't want it to be super blown out. And then what we can do is this melanin is quite nice, especially in this case. We can just bump it up a little bit, and that kind of increases the like a red distribution glow in the field, and it gives it quite a nice look. I think it's just up this value, but play these settings. Now that's looking pretty decent now. We can even maybe up this. Let's double this count. Takes a little while to cook, and that's not looking too bad. One thing I just wanted to point out as a last thing, this procedural, if you just disconnect it, obviously my render is going to disappear, but if I bump it at the end here, every time I now change a light value, it's going to take a while to recook, and that seems like it's generating through the whole network. So I would just advise to put it above anywhere that's got changes that you want to do, lighting changes or camera changes, just to make it a little bit more efficient. So now you can slide up and down and change things interactively. It's a little bit more efficient. Okay, so I'm happy with that.